guys and gals, and Blender Tech here. Welcome to another video from the team at blendertech.com. If you enjoy it or learn something from the video, then consider liking it and to subscribe for more Blender, Unity 3D, coding, and all sorts of other CG related videos. Lastly, don't forget our motto, create your way. So I am doing another video for Miss Leeland who wanted to learn a little bit more about Blender, and so I'm going to go into some actual 3D modeling and a little bit of material editing, or creation I guess you could call it, and then we're going to do a full render. It's going to be, since it's Christmas Eve, it's going to be the last Christmas thing I think I'll pop out of Blender, but I think it's going to drive home some of the core fundamentals of modeling with Blender. Now, I went Christmas shopping just to finalize the last few Christmas gifts, and I am the most impulsive shopper in the world. I spent about as much on myself as I did on other people. So I decided to buy myself a new microphone. I've been looking and eyeing microphones up for a while because I've always wanted the sound quality. I do music on the side part-time, but I've never really had a quality microphone. The microphone I started with was my laptop microphone. Then I upgraded to a stand microphone that was about $20, and then I upgraded to my Rock Band microphone from my Xbox, which had great sound quality, but I had to create a custom mount from Home Hardware parts. But now I finally went and invested in a Blue Yeti, which, you know, it's gotten great reviews for the last couple of years. It's the latest model made in this year, and so far I'm quite happy with it. That said, it's not perfectly dialed in. In fact, I can see on my monitor that I'm clipping a little bit, so I am just going to turn the gain down slightly. Just don't want to clip, because I'm used to speaking very loudly because I'm used to my microphone being right in front of my face so that it could pick up my voice. However, with this microphone, it's currently sitting approximately 15 inches from my mouth, and I'm talking in a normal but slightly amplified talking voice, and it's still picking it up at about 75 to 90% audio levels, so I can clip if I talk too loud, so I still have to dial this in, so ignore any audio problems. Anyway, to stop rambling, oh, and by the way, I still have a desk mount. I still haven't come up with a shock mount, so you're still gonna get the keyboard and mouse clicks, but I'm sure you guys can live with those as you have for a while. So we are going to model a Christmas light. So, this is actually good practice for me doing these videos for personal users. I haven't really done any up until the last few days. I've told people that I'll gladly do videos for them, but up until the last few days, when I've had a few articles or a few videos featured on adventures in Blender, I really haven't had the popularity of having people asking me. But anyways, so this Leeland has asked me to show her how to model a Christmas light. Now this has many applications because this shows you how to create basically lights in Blender, so this can be applied to so many different situations, but I'm not gonna ramble on anymore. Let's get started. So I'm just gonna this is more or less the stock view you'd have when you start a brand new Blender setup. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close the timeline. We don't need that, so I'm just gonna drag this arrow down. Like I said, this is great practice for me. I get to practice speaking in a slower pace, doing things slower, not using as many hotkeys, and going back to my teaching roots where I really wanted to teach like absolute beginner Blender users how to use it. And I'm gonna close this T toolbar just for now so we have some more screen real estate by pressing T, or you can click, there's a little button here somewhere, I don't even know where it is, but yeah, I'm just gonna press T to close that. You'll see the key presses that I pressed down here, and I've made my mini axis as big as possible. Anyways, so a Christmas light. How are we gonna model that? Well, the first thing you do when you're modeling something, as anyone might suggest, is look at some reference images. So I'm gonna hop on Google and get a picture of a Christmas light. So here's the kind of style we're going for. It's very egg-shaped, and then it's got kind of a cylinder at the bottom, and then it's got the contact. I don't think we'll get into the actual screw part because that's a little more advanced, but we'll definitely do the little cylinder and this egg shape. So because this goes back to the basics of understanding that all shapes, well, in the 3D world, are made up of primitive shapes. In this case, I would call this a sphere that's been compressed on the sides, and then a simple cylinder. So it's made up of two primitive shapes. So let's hop back into Blender, and I'll quickly drive that idea into us. I'm going to hide my camera by right-clicking on it and unchecking off the I button, or pressing H to hide it. So I'm going to delete the stock cube by selecting it and pressing X, and I also want to go to File, User Preferences, and just show some preferences that I've enabled, that I've always used, and that I suggest you enable for ease of use. So under Interface is the only place we're going to make changes. I suggest that you uncheck Python tooltips, because this is just going to clutter up your view. You see, if I check it and go back over it, it's got the Python thing underneath it. Very annoying if you're not a programmer. Next, uncheck cursor depth and check off auto depth. And then lastly, check off zoom to mouse position. This should make your use of Blender a lot easier. So just hit save user settings and you should be good to go from there. And if you have a video card that supports it, under system, check off CUDA, and your renders will be a lot faster, but that's not vital at all. Anyways, we are gonna go to the cycles render. I keep forgetting to save that as a preset. I'm going to set my device to GPU since I have it. If you don't have it, just leave it on CPU. Like I said, not a big deal, just a little bit slower. And I'm just gonna show you the basic primitive shapes. So I'm gonna move my cursor to center by going Shift S and cursor to center. Now you can also go, how do you do this? Snap, snap, snap. You can also go object, snap, cursor to center. So that's the other way to do it without hotkeys. Like I said, this is a good way for me to practice going back to my roots in doing things for the absolute beginner. So yeah, object, snap, cursor to center. You're going to be doing that a lot. So it is very useful to learn the hotkey Shift S. This allows you to change your cursor to different places, as well to move things to where the cursor is. So your 3D cursor is kind of where you're gonna, think of it as where you're gonna drop objects into 3D space. Wherever your 3D cursor is in 3D space is where your objects are gonna be put. That's a good way to think of it from the beginning. So I'm just going to snap it back to center to make sure it's directly centered. And you can see it's right snap in the center of our grid. So if you've forgotten, I'm holding down my middle mouse button and dragging just to rotate around the view. If I hold Shift and do the same thing, it pans it left and right and forward and back, or up and down, I guess. And lastly, we use our mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Now, by enabling those settings in the user preferences that I showed you, this allows us to zoom in easier. So if I put my mouse cursor right in the center and use my mouse wheel to zoom in, it's going to zoom right into that area. And if I put my mouse cursor to the corner of the grid, it's going to zoom in right to there. So that's much easier, whereas the default settings, it just zooms in right to where the 3D cursor is centered, I believe. Anyways, so a Christmas bulb is made up of two primitive shapes. So I'm going to add a mesh cylinder. Now, if you've watched my intro to 3D space, I went over how 3D objects are made up of vertices. Down here in vertex select mode, there's line select mode, so they're made up of lines. And there's also face select mode, so we can select faces. So faces, lines, and vertices. So I'm just going to undo that. Control Z, or standard undo procedure. Lastly, a few more things to go over. A is the select and deselect hotkey, so just drive that one home. That's very easy to remember. A, just remember all. It selects or deselects all. Very easy to remember. And a few ones to remember. G for grab, so that grabs it. And obviously you left click to confirm where your movement is. S to scale, so that makes it bigger or smaller. And R to rotate, so it's G, S, and R, just like it's the first letters of the word. And you can do this to anything. You can do this to faces, lines, and to vertices. You can't scale and rotate vertices, at least not without going into advanced topics anyway. So that's the basics of that. Anyways, so our bulb is going to be made up of a cylinder and also a sphere. So I'm just going to put the cylinder back in the middle. Let's see here. Is it already in the middle? Yeah, it is already in the middle. So yeah, our cylinder's in the middle. And then I'm going to go to Object, Add. Now this is another hotkey I would get used to. Shift A, that's Add. So Shift A is Add, or you can just go Add down here. So whichever is easiest for you, but I suggest you get used to the hotkeys as soon as possible. So I'm going to Shift A, Add, and I'm going to add a circle, or sorry, a UV sphere. So, and then I'm going to use the manipulators, which are these colored arrows here, and I'm just going to drag it up. So you're starting to see the basic idea here. You can change your manipulators down here. So this is the translate or grab manipulator, which grabs it obviously. And if you're grabbing it somewhere and you decide you don't want it there, you can right click and it'll go back to where it was originally. You can also change it to the rotate one, and you can rotate it around the axis. Remember what the colors are. They're exactly as you would see down here. In fact, I'm going to press N. I'm going to go to display, and I'm going to check off Z. So now in the 3D viewport, this area here, we now see all three axes based on their colors. The red, green, and blue for X, Y, and Z respectively. And lastly, there's the scale manipulator. So by dragging these, you can also scale it. So there you go. There's our basic bulb shape right there. So play with these a little bit and get your bulb shape down. So I'm going to do something like that. And then right click on your cylinder to select it and do the same thing. We're going to scale it. Or again, use your hotkeys S, R, or G. So I'm going to use S to scale in this instance. We don't need it that big, something like that. I'm going to go to side view, so I'm going to go view right. This is the standard side view. And I'm going to go to view perspective / ortho. You can see it changes almost to, well, it does change it from 3D to 2D. So this is also numpad 5. So get used to pressing numpad 5. I work almost exclusively in ortho mode. Now what ortho stands for is orthographic. And what that means is there's no perspective. You just see it flat straight on. Now we can still rotate around, and we can still get an idea of the 3D shapes. But if we go to the side, the top, the front, etc., you get basically a 2D view. So I use this almost exclusively. However, if it's easier for you, and I think it will be, we're gonna use perspective mode. But I suggest that you get used to orthographic mode because it makes modeling more precise, and it'll make your models look better faster basically. But for now this looks kind of retarded, so we need to squeeze this down a little bit too. So let's grab this manipulator and let's just scale it along the Y a little bit. But you'll see it's now done along the, it's squished it only in that way. So let's scale it along the X a little bit too. So now it's a tiny little cylinder, and it looks a good shape for our bulb. But our bulb doesn't look like a bulb. If we go back to our image, we can see that the top shape looks exactly the same, but on the bottom it really it gets fatter, and then it gets skinny again, and it gets completely flat. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go into edit mode of our object. So we're in object mode right now. We're gonna go into edit mode. In edit mode, this is where you can make all the changes to your object. So I'm gonna get a side view as best as I can. In fact, I recommend that you go to right view. So that's numpad 3 or view right to get a perfect side view. And what we're going to do is we are going to delete these bottom vertices down here to flatten the bottom out. So there's a few ways to do this. You can select them one by one by clicking on them, or you can shift click to select multiple ones. However, in this instance, there's a much faster way to do it. You can circle select by pressing C and using your mouse wheel to change the size of it. So this is just like a brush in GIMP. You use the mouse wheel to change the shape, and that allows you to select any number of vertices that your brush hovers over. And if you want to deselect, you click with the middle mouse button, or you click and hold with the middle mouse button. But I'm going to press A twice to undo that selection. So I'm going to get rid of my circle select by right clicking. Then I'm going to press A twice, and that gets rid of all my selection. You can also box select to get a perfect selection, a perfect square. So if you press B, again, B for box, C for circle, very easy to remember. We're going to use box select to get a nice accurate selection. So we're going to click and drag here, and we're going to select the bottom two rows, I guess. So this one right here and this bottom point right here, we're going to select those. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete them. So we're going to press X, that's the delete key, and we're going to choose what we want to delete. In this case, we just want to delete the vertices. So we're going to click delete vertices. And you'll see we are left off with almost a completely flat shape. You'll see that it only deleted half of it if you move around. That is because this option down here, limit selection to visible, is turned on. If we turn it off, we can see through our objects. So you can see now that I can see through to the other side. So let me repeat that. I'm going to undo what we just did, but this time we have limit selection to visible turned off. If we do the same thing and select that same area, then press X to delete and choose vertices, now it's deleted them all and it's left us with a perfectly flat hole to work with. So that's just something to be aware of. If you delete something and it seems a little unusual, check that option to see whether it's on or off. And depending on the instance, it's going to change whether you want it on or off. In this case, we want it off so that we can select both sides of our object. Otherwise, you would have to go around and do the other side. This just saves us time. So now we have these row of vertices down here that is roughly the same size as our cylinder. So let's put these together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire bulb by pressing A. So we've now selected the entire thing. It's all highlighted. We're going to use our transform or grab manipulators right here, or press G to move it around. And also when you're using the G to grab, the R to rotate, or the S to scale keys, you can also lock it to an axis by pressing the axis letters Z, X, and Y. So in this case, since we're in orthographic view, we only have the Z and Y axis. So I can press G to grab and put it anywhere in the Z and Y axis, or if I press Z now, I can move it only in the Z axis, or if I press Y, I can move it only in the Y axis. And it gives you this extra double highlighted line to show you that you're only able to move it in those axes. So I'm going to right click to undo that. I don't want to confirm that yet. We are going to, since this is all centered, I'm going to grab pressing G, and then I'm going to press Z to move it in the Z axis, and I'm going to move it down till it's on top of what we would consider our little plug-in part. And I'm going to press A to deselect. So now we have our basic bulb shape on top of our light. So what next? Well, let's make it look like a bulb. So we are going to use the node editor for that. So first of all, let's split our window by dragging this arrow down in the corner. And let's split it roughly in half. Now using this little button in the bottom, let's go into the node editor. It's empty for now. And up here, move your cursor up here, and I'm going to scroll out so I can see the whole thing. And let's change our mode, so our display mode. Right now we're in solid mode. Let's change it to material mode. That way we'll be able to see what changes happen when we add a material. So we're going to add a material to our sphere, our bulb. So that's this little circle icon. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's that button right there. And we're going to press new to make a new material. Now you can give it a name if you want to. We could call it bulb material, or whatever name, it doesn't matter. You can give it any name you want, or you can just leave it. It does not matter at all. But anyways, I'm going to make that a little bit smaller so we have more screen real estate. I'm going to zoom into this area now. So what diffuse means is diffuse means color. So if you click on this white box here, you can give our bulb any color you want. We can make a green bulb, we can make a blue bulb, we can make a red bulb, etc. We're going to make a red bulb because that is what it looked like in this case. So we now have a red bulb. So just choose the red that you like. I'm going to go for a nice medium red. Not totally red, but a nice medium red. And I'm quite happy with that. You can also go from edit mode to object mode to get rid of the wireframe view. The wireframe view is... Sorry. Is the lines and dots, the vertices and lines and faces that make up your object. So if that's getting annoying and in the way, just move back into object mode. So the next thing we're going to do in the node editor is we're going to add some glossiness to it, because in the real world every object reflects light at least a little bit. Nothing is perfectly just a color. Everything is shiny to some degree. So how we're going to do that is we're going to just, anywhere in space, we're going to do the same thing as with a model. We would go Shift A, or we can just click Add. We're going to go Add Shader, and we have all different shaders in here, and you can play with these all you want. There's tons in here to play around with. We're going to choose Glossy, however, and we're going to place it anywhere, but I want to place it right below the diffuse. Now this is the standard setup for 99% of materials, a diffuse and glossy. This will give you perfect results most of the time. I'm going to select this material output node, and I'm just going to press G to grab it, just like we would with our objects. I'm just going to put it off to the side so we have more room. I'm now going to add another node, so I'm going to add again, so Shift A or press the add button in the bottom. However, this time we're going to choose another shader called a mix shader, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It mixes two shaders together. So we're going to take color to color, so green to green, and we're going to drag them. So we're going to take basically this side is the input, this side is the output. So input, output, input, output, input, output. So I'm going to take the output of the diffuse to the top input of the mix. I'm also going to take the input of the glossy, the output of the glossy to the bottom input of the mix. However, we have a problem. Our diffuse is going to the mix as well as to the output. That's a problem. So to delete a line, you can click and just leave it off in space and it'll get rid of it. Or you can hold down Control and click and drag to draw a line through it, and that'll erase any line that you've drawn over. But now our light bulbs turn black. To fix that, we need to take the output of the mix shader and put it into the surface material output. volume and displacement is nothing we'll have to worry about for a long time. You'll see it's now turned pink. That's because we're mixing the red diffuse with the white glossiness. So we now have a factor. So a factor says how much of this diffuse and how much of the glossy do we want to use. So right now at 0.5 it's 50% of each. If I go to 0.1, so I'm going to type in 0.1, that means it's going to do 10% of the, that means it's going to do 90% of the top and 10% of the bottom. So that means right now we have a 90% colored and a 10% glossy material. And that's a general good starting point. If we go back to our 3D viewport and go into rendered mode to give us a preview of what it'll look like, that's basically what it'll look like. And we can adjust this to be exactly what we want. So this is completely glossy. This is like chrome. We don't want that. We want it, like I said, at about 0.1 to 0.2 is a good starting point. So pick a value that you like, and that's just a good way to make realistic looking materials. Let's move back into material mode. You can see if we zoom in, there's these facets on our bulb. That's completely unrealistic. To fix this very easily, all we have to do is open up our menu, our toolbar menu, by pressing T. And then, with our object selected, so make sure our bulb is got this yellow highlight around it, just press the smooth button. And as you can see, you can no longer see those facets. If you click flat, they come back. If you click smooth, they're gone. So we can press T to get rid of that toolbar again. We can focus back in on our bulb, and if we go back to rendered mode, we can see that it's now smooth and it's got a little bit of glossiness. You can see the light reflecting off it here. So that looks somewhat like a bulb. However, it's a bulb that's turned off. Let's do something kind of cool and let's make it turned on. So let's go back into material mode and let's do some more node editing in our node editor window. So let's grab all three of these. So we can do that three ways, same as with the objects. We can hold down shift and right click on all three. We can press C for circle select and go over all three, or we can box select and select all three. So just select all three and then press G to grab and move them off to the side. Now we're going to add another shader. So I'm going to add a shader. I'm going to add an emission shader. This does exactly what you think. It emits light. So the strength is measured in watts. So usually light bulbs at Christmas I think are about 60 to 100 watts. I'm going to type in 100 just as a starting point. So strength is measured in watts when it comes to emission nodes. And the color, we're going to give it a nice red color as well. I'm going to use the same red color. So here's a little trick. Click and hold on the color from your diffuse and we can drag it and drop it into the color slot in our emission shader. So now it will emit red light as well. However, this emission shader is not connected to anything, so it's not going to do anything. We need to mix it in somehow. So to do that, we're going to add in a different shader. We could use a mix shader, however, that wouldn't do the results we wanted. We're going to use an add shader. It works extremely similarly, it just doesn't have a factor. Instead, it just adds them together. So what this is doing is well, first let's connect the dots. It's taking all of this and it's adding it to it's adding the emission and then it's outputting it. So let's go into rendered view in our 3D viewport again and see what that looks like. As you can see, our bulb is bright white, but you can tell that it's putting off red light because our white base has turned red. So we can change our color to something less strong, or you can see how that really changes the look of it. Or let me just get my color back here. we can change our strength down. So somewhere around 3 looks like a good value. So that still gives us the bulb look, but it's still going to give us a little bit of emission. The reason we had to turn it down so much is because we didn't make the bulb glass like it actually should be. That would be a bit more advanced, and if you're going through this no problem, then I will show you how to make a glass bulb with a light inside of it, which I wanted to do, but I decided it would take much too long. However, this is quite boring to look at. It's a basic bulb. So let's get rid of our node editor now that we've kind of perfected our material. And let's go back into, it doesn't matter, solid, textured, material, whatever. I'm going to go into solid mode. Let's give this something to look at. So the way I usually do this is I add some walls and a floor. To do this, let's move our cursor back, our 3D cursor, this one right here. Let's move it back to center. Do you remember how to do that? Shift S or Object Snap. So I'm going to go Shift S, cursor to center. So as you can see, that's right back to the center. So I'm going to give us a floor. So I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh plane. We've worked with these before. And I'm going to scale it by pressing S, and I'm going to scale it to be about this, well, it'll be unrealistic, but I'm going to go just a little bit bigger than about 3 or 4 squares this way. So about that big. Now I'm going to create some walls. So to do that, I'm going to introduce a new topic called duplication. So duplication is exactly as it sounds. It duplicates an object, or in this case, well, a mesh, an object, however you want to look at it. So to duplicate an object, you go Object and Duplicate Objects. The hotkey is Shift D. So I'm just going to use the hotkey, but just so you know, you can do it from the object menu down here as well. So I'm going to go Shift D, and as you see, we now have a duplicate object. So I'm going to leave it right on top of the other one. I could put it right there. However, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to right click. Now it will look like it disappeared, but if we go to our outliner here, we see that we actually have plain decimal 001. That's our second one. They're sitting right on top of each other, so it looks like there's actually only one. However, if I press G, you can see that there's actually 2. So I'm going to right click to leave it back where it was. However, you can see that I have plain 001 selected in the corner. So that's how you know which object you have selected, or the one that's highlighted up here, or it tells you up here. And if you right click again, it selects the one below it. So you can right click and it selects both of them. Or sorry, it selects one and then the other. But we want to select the one we duplicated. So anyways, let's set this up to be a wall. So let's grab it along the Y. So let's just drag it over here. Now we need to rotate it. So let's rotate it. And you'll see it's not very accurate if we just press R. So we need to rotate around the x-axis. You can see that turns it that way. Now rotating can be a little bit of a daunting task at first to comprehend. Think of it this way: when I rotate and then press X to rotate around the x-axis, think of it as if the red line that appears is a is basically like a hinge or a lever. So I'm rotating it around this lever here. You can see how it rotates around that red line. So think of the red line, the x-axis in this case, as a lever. And if I rotate it around the y-axis by pressing RY, it would do the same thing, just in the other direction. So I'm going to rotate around the x-axis. I'm going to go 90 degrees. So you can do this manually, or you can just type in 90 and then press enter. However, our walls aren't lined up at all. So we can line them up manually. We can move them with our manipulators and get them lined up. And then we can keep moving our viewport around till they're about roughly lined up. And that's exactly how I'm going to do it for this lesson. There's a way to get them perfectly lined up, but this is going to be good enough for us. So we now have a back wall. Let's create one more wall. So now that we have this one selected with the outline around it, let's duplicate it. So Shift D again, or you can go from the menu, and I'm going to right click to leave it in the exact same place. Now again, we're going to grab it. So G, or use the arrows, and move it right into the center here. Now we're going to rotate it. However, this time we need to rotate it around the Z axis. Let me zoom out so we can see this a bit better. We need to rotate it, so R and then Z, around the Z. I'm a Canadian, so Z axis. And we want to rotate this one 90 degrees as well. Actually, in this case, it would be -90, but it doesn't matter when you're first learning. So I'm going to rotate -90 along the Z. Sorry, no, I was wrong. Rotate 90 degrees along the Z. So there we have it, our second wall. Now let's just drag it in so that we have our two walls and our floor. So now if we go into rendered mode, so down here, right now we're in solid. We're going to click on this and choose rendered mode. We get a cool little scene. We have our bulb, which is emitting red light everywhere, which is actually a little bit too strong, so we could break our window open again. Whoops. We could break our window open again and go back into the node editor. And then we could select our bulb by right-clicking on it here or in the outliner. And then we could turn the emission strength down even further so that it has just a light glow. And then we can close that window off by dragging this down till we get that arrow again. And now we get a preview of our render. So yeah, like I said, we have a kind of neat scene here. We have our bulb with its base. It's casting a shadow onto the wall, and this is because of our lamp right here. So if we turn it into a sun lamp, it's going to look a little different. A spot lamp is going to look a little different. An hemisphere lamp, an area lamp is going to look a little different. An area or point lamp is going to be your best bet in this instance. And changing size changes the sizes of the shadows. So you'll see if I turn it way up, it's a very soft shadow, and if we turn it way down, it's a very hard shadow. So that's a complete preference to you. And I've done this just by choosing lamp in the outliner here. Or if you're in solid mode, texture mode, or material mode, you can just select your lamp, which happens to be right here, by right-clicking on it. So now we need to set up our camera for a render. So let's select our camera and press numpad 0 to go into our camera preview mode. And again, we could go view camera to do the same thing. So view camera. And so this gives us a preview of where our camera is gonna see and what our render is gonna look at. Now, if we click on the little camera icon here, we have some options. We can go to camera presets and we can choose from a bunch of different presets. The Blender preset works just fine, but just for fun, let's choose the iPhone 5 preset. So it's going to take a picture or it's going to do a render as if it was taken by an iPhone 5 camera. But right now, we can't see all of our scene as we would like, unless you want it to be right here. Let's adjust it a little. So I'm going to press the I button. That way it gets highlighted again. Excuse me. You can see the yellow or orange highlighting. That means we can now move it. And we're going to press G to grab it. So you can see we can now move around with it. And if it's too fast for you, just hold down Shift and you can get, that's called precision mode. And this works for everything in Blender. So just grab it and get it somewhere you like it. You can also rotate it, but make sure you're rotating it along one axis at a time so that you get the view you want. So I'm going to rotate it along the Y axis a little bit, and I'm going to rotate it along the X axis a little bit. And then I'm going to grab it again to get kind of an overhead view. And I'm going to center it on the walls. And I'm fairly happy with that shot. We could go into render mode again to get a preview of it. So this is what our camera is going to see. And if you want an even better preview, you can click on the very first tab, the render tab, and you can press border, and that renders only what the camera can see. Now let's set up our render. So we're going to do a full HD render, so that's 1920 by 1080 in the X and Y respectively at 100%. It's not an animation, so we don't need to worry about anything else. The output, we can choose a folder for it, so I always leave it on /tmp/, but again, you can choose your desktop or wherever to put it. And we're going to choose our format. A PNG is just fine. I'm going to change it to RGB, however, since we don't have an alpha channel. That's an advanced topic, but you can leave it on RGBA. It doesn't matter. Everything else is fine. In fact, everything's fine. The only thing to really worry about is sampling. So, sampling, if we zoom in here, you can see the noise. I'm going to zoom in really, really, really far. You can see the noise, but you can see that it gets less and less and less as I let it go longer. So if I turn up the samples of my preview, right now we're in preview mode, if I turn it up to 100, it's going to take about 10 times as long to do it, but you'll see it's going to get, let me just move it, you'll see it gets less and less and less and less noisy to a point. There's diminishing returns. But eventually it will get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. However, as you can see, it's taking longer and longer to render. Right now, I have it about 20 seconds in and about 30 seconds to go. So, a good setting to go for though. Leave your preview on 10. That way you're not bogging down your computer. However, set your render to 100. 100 is a good starting point. However, professional renders are at about 1,000. If you have square samples enabled, that means everything is going to be multiplied by a power. So you'll see the total samples down here is 10,000. So that's 100 times 100. So uncheck that so that you have more accurate ability to choose how many samples. Like I said, in this case we want 100. So now let's render out our image. So to do that, we're going to do the same as we did for an animation or anything before. I'm sure you figured this out by now. Now, there's also this one up here. You can render it and hit render image, or there's the hotkey F12. I simply just press F12. So hit F12 and it will start doing the boxes one by one to 100 samples. And after a little bit of time, in this case about a minute and a half, we will get our full image rendered out. So I'll let it do its thing. So if this was my first render ever, this would be something I would want to show to my friends and family and say, hey, guess what? I created this on the computer. This isn't real life. This isn't a picture. This is something that I generated. I made this on the computer myself. This is an art piece that I created. Now obviously this is a very unrealistic looking bulb. We could make it look like glass with an actual lamp inside and the filament, and we could add the screws to the base, and we could make the walls look like actual walls. We could make a string of lights. Again, your creativity and your skills are the only limits. But this is just a basic intro to this. So that is how to render a very basic looking bulb. However, a very unrealistic one. However, it acts like a bulb. It emits a slight glow. It looks like one. And again, if this was my first render, I would be quite happy with it. It's a heck of a lot better than my first renders were. So hopefully this was easy enough for you to follow, Leeland. And if you have any more questions, just let me know. Again, I suggest you do some fun tutorials by Andrew Price. They may be lengthy, and he may go a bit faster, but you'll get a much cooler, a much more realistic, and a much funner looking scene in the end. So that's all the topics I'm going to cover for now. I'm going to leave it off there. Thanks for watching from the team here at BlenderTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, please like it and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. We're now on Twitter at twitter.com/blender_tech. That's at blender_tech, and Facebook at facebook.com/blendertech page, all one word. If you want a hard copy of our video to download on your computer, just let us know. If you dislike this video for some reason, please tell us why. Leave a comment, or if it's private, email us at info@blendertech.com so that we can continually improve our videos based on community input. We also take requests for tutorials or help. See you next time, and remember, create your way.